Howdy, folks. It's Meandering Mike in the man cave of madness. It's middle of the late evening, and we have completed our playthrough of Rommel, The Campaign for North Africa by Loren, Sperry, 1973. We did the first scenario, which is the Italians and the Brits. The British have with them their New Zealander, Australian, and an Indian infantry divisions, and a large British armor division and a small brigade. There was also a Polish brigade. So this first scenario ended in a victory for the Allies. So I'm gonna give you the rundown of what happened, and then I'll go on to my after action review from the sense of the overall how I feel about the game. But this is the recap, the after action review of the action of this one here. So I am going to move this out of the way so it's not distracting us. I'm gonna zoom out. Right now, you can see way over there is the Australian Infantry Division. They took the home base. They got past El Aguilia into the home base area. There's a independent brigade squatting in Benghazi. The rest of the army, British Army, is here in Tobruk. So, the fighting happened here. The last you saw, the British had broke through, had attacked Tobruk, had a bad result. The Italians were trying to cut them off, and then the British sort of attacked back and got their way out through here. At that point, the Italians knew that, man, they really couldn't do too much other than just try to hold out as long as they can. The Italian infantry division stayed here in the escarpment at city Rezige. I think is actually how you pronounce it, Rezige. The Italian armor brigade was going to try to make a run for it, to try to get into Benghazi or down to the home base to try to protect that stuff. Because if they could escape with one unit and keep the Allies out of one of the, they could still get a tactical victory. The problem is that turn where they're trying to run, they didn't have new supplies, right? The rule of if they're getting supplies on the turn on the chart there, then they have fuel for armored units. If they're not receiving one, they don't. So that armored unit was only able to move half. It was only able to get down to here. So what happened on the British turn, here's Tobruk, here's infantry, Italian infantry there, one brigade. They decided, we're not going to attack Tobruk this turn. We're going to screen it. We're going to attack this infantry unit and attack that armor unit. So the Brits actually, ran a unit down to here, and here they surrounded the unit. Here, the armor brigade, and in here, so the two units were surrounded. They did not attack that. They had like one screening unit here in the middle. And they were able to kill both of those. So Tobruk was the last bastion of the Italians. After that, and there's no way the Italians were going to attack out of there. They just squatted there. They had a weakened infantry division. They had an armor brigade. Or it was armor brigade, not a mech infantry, and they had a headquarters. So they had 4 strength points. They had the supply. After that, they had enough supply that they could have a supply every turn, that they could keep spending on defense every turn. So the British surrounded it and attacked. The Indian division had to leave. That's what the withdrawals on the map over here. So they had to leave. But the turn, so there was some exciting action. The turn that they attacked the unit here and here, the Indian division was over here. They got enough big result against it that this unit, it had that weakened step, so it only had that last step, plus it could invert. It's one of the few Italian units that could invert, so that's an extra step potentially to lose. Well, the Brits here rolled a 4 result, which was enough to have 2 movement points left over. The Indian division was here on the road, so it was able to advance in and move this way with its movement points to actually get to attack. It's like a move you wouldn't normally do. No, the next turn, the Indian division was going to leave. The Indian division, they have to withdraw at the 5 strength level. The division was at the 8 strength level. So in a sense, there's 1 spare. I can attack with it. If I only lose 1, I'm not taking too much excess away. If I lost 2, I'd have to make up the result. But if I lost nothing, I'm sort of wasting, because you have to remove the Indian division, and you have to account for at least 5 strength points. So he actually moved up and attacked, and he did manage to get a 1-1 result. So he's attacking at 1-1 here. Let's see, let's zoom in a little better here so you can see that. Well, sort of see that on your screen. If you're on a browser and you make it max screen, you may be able to see this. So 1-1 odds. Now the Brits had a supply unit here where they're actually able to trace 5 hexes to their units that were attacking here and here. So they only had to burn 1 supply, and so they were still in supply when that Indian unit was getting its second move after combat to attack. The Italians were burnt their supply because they were going to have enough. They were going to get, from that point on, 1 every turn, so they were always going to be able to burn on supply for defense. So they did. So the attacker was supplied, the defender was burning, so it was adding 1 to the die roll. 1-1, adding 1. Can't remember if they rolled a 1 or 2. It didn't matter because retreats are ignored when you're sitting in here. So it was a 1-1 result. So the Indian division took 1 step loss down to 5. They lost 1 here. And so the Italian division, that was the regular division, took its step loss. And the reason they used him, you'd only lose 1 combat point, and it would be able to be inverted. So that inverted guy, remember, can be taken in the future as a absorb another casualty. So it would, it gives no strength, but you could, if you had replacements, you could beef it back up. But it actually allowed them to have another loss off of it. So it had gone down from 4 strength points being doubled here. That's why there had been 4 strength points, doubled to 8. The Indian division, infantry division, was an 8, so that's why it was a 1-1. After that, the division was down to 5 strength points, and they were down to 3 strength points here, but plus the absorption, dude. So that happened all that turn. So that's when the Italians were now isolated, and they were a little weakened in Tobruk. After that, the Italians just sat. The Brits elected to send the Australian division down the road so they could go through Benghazi and Eligili. If they could get to the home base, wipe out all the Italians and have at least 20 strength points left, they could win a strategic victory. And if the Italians could hold off, they could potentially win a victory. As long as they have at least 1 strength point alive, they can win a victory. So it became a siege of Tobruk, and the lone Italian guy. So at the end here, they had made that assault. They assaulted again. They got a result where they only got 1 loss on them. I think it was a 3-1 then, because now they had the guys that were here able to attack. The Indian division was gone, but you had the New Zealanders and the armored, which at one point was at 10 strength. They took a loss here. There was the HQ, and there was the brigade. So they're able to attack and get like 3-1 odds, I think it was. And they had a net result here where they caused 1 damage only, and they didn't lose any. That caused the that inverted unit of the Italians to be lost, and then they kept assaulting. So eventually they whittled it down, and on the last turn of December, Tobruk was eliminated. The last 2 steps, because at the end there was just a headquarters unit and Italian brigade, which neither of those has the inverted stage. If they each take a loss, so 2 losses, and that's what they got on that December turn. They got two losses to finish them off. but they weren't able to advance right away, because this game, you don't automatically advance the counter. You have to have excess damage against the enemy stack where they can't absorb everything, and as long as you have at least one, you'll have one movement point, you can move. Now, in the rule book, they talk about that as movement points. Over here, this little supplemental area talking about, retreats and that stuff, they talk about hexes, that the enemy can advance number of hexes. Yes, if losing units cannot absorb specified step reductions, unit is eliminated and winner may advance at a rate of 1 hex for each step not made. So the problem with that, saying 1 hex, that means you could advance through like the salt marshes, the Katara Depression. Now, technically, you're not supposed to. I think it might be in the those advanced rules where they say that only recon units can move through here. It never really makes sense to try to get in here and do this. I mean, there's later in the campaign, it's later scenario. Yeah, I still don't believe it. But anyway, normally you have to stop for an escarpment, whether the road bonus. So I was playing by movement until I discovered this later. It's like, okay, well, it's hexes, but because if you were on the road and you were advancing, to me, well, the road is supposed to cost you half, and since you're on the road, you wouldn't have to stop. So that's why the Indian division, did this thing here when he had 2 movement points before. But anyway, they couldn't, at the end of the summer term, they couldn't actually take Tobruk. It wouldn't be technically until January, the 1st of January. So Tobruk fell then, that the Allies were able to move in. They captured Benghazi, and by the end of the game, they got the unit, down to here. The same January, the first turn, but then they had a independent brigade over here to make sure that they were occupying both of those. So certainly by the January 3rd turn, they had both the Italian home base, Benghazi, Tobruk occupied. Now, when you're capturing these ports to use for, like, in a campaign game or a longer scenario, like, you have to garrison Benghazi for 4 turns before you can start using its sea movement. So if the British take Benghazi, they can't sea movement into and out until after 4 turns of garrison duty. But in terms of capturing it, you control it once you move in there. If you're the sole occupier, you've controlled it. Tobruk, you can start using its sea movement capacity the turn after you occupy it. But you must always leave a garrison in Tobruk to keep doing that. Whereas Benghazi, once you've done your 4 turns of occupation and can start using it, you can then not leave a garrison anymore, and you can keep doing the sea movement. Again, something that you'd probably only see that kind of stuff happen in the campaign game, or maybe the mid scenario where the Germans show up. So anyway, the Allies did just barely able to get the strategic victory because they took those in time, and they had 23 strength points left. 23 combat strength points. You need the 20. So they managed to do it just barely. Okay, so that was the action after. Now the after action review part of the game. I like the game. Okay, it became quite exciting. There was a lot of interesting moments. Like, I just, God, the Italians could hold out. They could do this. It was swingy enough. Like, but they managed to. I don't know if earlier on, I think it's more important. Like, I got to make sure I have like 2 full strength infantry divisions, the kind that have the steps, the 2 2s that have the step loss and the inverted marker. Get those in there. You don't need a brigade if you got 2 2s, because 2 divisions max, and you can have, well, let's see, could you have more strength? You pump through all your armor brigade, 2 armor brigades and 1 armored infantry. That's 6 points. Those are only 3 steps with no inverteds, but it's 6 strength, and then have 1 of the other, so 6, 8 plus headquarters 9. So I don't know. I'd have to decide. Do I want to have two strength infantry divisions that have the step and the inverted stage, because a lot more times they have to attack, a lot more losses. So you have two of those and a headquarters, because you can always put in a headquarters. Headquarters do not count against stacking. So that's 5 points with 5, so each infantry can be reduced once to their 1-2 stage, reduced again to their inverted stage, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, because the loss of that, they can absorb 7 total steps, whereas one infantry division of a 2-2 nature for the Italians, and 3 brigades, it's one less. I don't know, but it's more strength. 6, 7, 8, 9. But yeah, so you'd make that decision. So I'd have to noodle out the odds and see what if you're basically running back and abandoning Tobruk right away, but if the Brits can then get up with everybody, their full strength, going up against 6, 7, 8, 9, doubled 18. Wow. Yeah, you'd have to look at what their odds are. Can they get 36 and have 2-to-1s? A bunch of 2-to-1, 1-to-1s, kind of a weird CG thing, and how long it'll take to reduce it. I don't. That's fun. Like, so all this, the fact that I'm thinking about it, right, means there's replayability here, right? So certainly at some point, at least another time in 2024, there's 2 other scenarios to play, right? The Germans show up, the Allies went this way and kicked the Italians, and then the Germans are going to show up with some more Italians. Yeah, it's going to go this way, and then you got the final push back and forth for the last part. So 2 more scenarios to play, and once I've played those, like, I can imagine probably also wanting to play the campaign game. Starting from the very beginning. Instead of playing this scenario again, this first one. So I see at least, doing that again, and that's certainly worth money. This did not cost that much, especially being an old game from 1973. I mean, there's a couple copies out there right now, at least last I checked on Board Game Geek. And I got my copy from a seller on Board Game Geek from Switzerland. And the shipping can be expensive sometimes if you get a bigger box game, but these kind of things, it's normally only like, say, $10 of shipping, maybe 12 from Switzerland to the US. And right now he's selling this for 40 in an unpunched. I believe there's someone in the US was selling a punched copy for 25 or something like that. I don't remember, but you can find this. But it's not that expensive as far as old games go, as old as 1973, right? So yes, the playability is there. It's something that I would definitely play again, fit the time in next year. I don't know if I'll get all those playthroughs in there, but yeah, definitely play it again. Now, as you've heard me talk, I'm going to zoom out here to see more of all this. There's things that I don't like about the game, and I don't want it to sound too harsh, because Loren Sperry, he's a one-game designer. He's got only 1 credit on Board Game Geek. He designed it. As far as we know, he's the only developer. Maybe he was the only playtester. He self-published it, independently published. I'm going to assume he probably had some playtesting, but it doesn't say in the rulebook. It does not say. But production-wise, for a self-produced game, not bad. There's some issues I would take with it. But let me talk about the rules. It shows that it wasn't developed enough. There's some wordings that are ambiguous. Definitely things like, if you start your turn in a zone of control, may you leave? Must you sit exactly where you are in attack? Can you move from zone to zone and then must stop? Because the rule says when you enter a zone. But if you're already in one, can you move one hex and then have to stop? It can quite drastically change the flavor of the play. If you must stay there and fight, or if you can move out of the zone, And can you move zone to zone or not in that sense? So until I can, I'm trying to get a hold of Loren Sperry on Facebook. I found a Loren Sperry who's in Wisconsin, which is where he was really from. Now, there's actually his address in the back saying, "For questions, mail a self-addressed stamp envelope." He may still live at that same address. I am actually going to try to send a letter and see if he'll answer questions. Odds are, in all that time, in 50 years, even if he still lives in the same town, he's probably moved, but maybe not. Sometimes people, end up staying or living and they're inheriting the home there where they grew up, where they're born or whatever. Or, maybe he was a young man who'd got married and he's in 73, he created this game and he's, still living in the same home. He could easily be that way. So I'll try to get some clarifications. But if not, you're going to have to decide for yourself how to clarify these rules. And you could easily go different ways. You could try it different ways. And say like, oh, it's a rigid zone. You must stay in the zone. If once you've entered it, you start in one, you must stay in attack. Or you can say you can leave. Or you can say, oh, you can leave, and you can even move zone to zone, but then you must stop. Retreats. Do retreats. Can you retreat through zones of control while retreating? Because if you can't, then that would destroy. Can you do it through enemy zones of control into a friendly hex? Now, I definitely want to allow that, even if you don't allow retreating through zone to zone, but some games don't even allow that. So, I don't know. You have to decide. What were some of the other... I'm going to mention a few other things. The step losses, I like it. I like the fact that each unit has potentially multiple step losses. The Italians, you have to remember the rule, but it becomes not that difficult that, wow, there's all these specialty wimpy Italian units, the brown shirts, those divisions that start with a 1-2 strength. Their headquarters, their brigades, so their divisions, their regular divisions, yeah, those have the normal rules of how many steps they have and do they actually go to an inverted state or there's one more loss or that unit could be potentially rescued and revived by replacements. I like it. I do. And it wasn't that tedious in my mind, going in and finding the right unit. Oh, the Indian unit take them off here, put them over here. They have all these them laid out here on the side. Now, I don't have the Germans here. I just had the Italians because there's no German units. There's just German supply units up there, the dark green guys. And, all the British are laid out here. Now, what I would do is I would make the grid more spaced out. Now, obviously, what seems like what he did is like, well, these are, these 1-inch counters, half-inch counters, and he drew a grid on here and used his ruler line. Again, this is a map he had printed himself, right? So however he drew this and had these hexagons on here and he's ruled and lined the charts, the things across the top, but laid out the print in nice fonts. So I don't know what it took for an individual to get this map laid out and printed. It probably typical like some kind of advertising where you're pasting on top of another thing, you're cutting out and you're pasting, and maybe he had some kind of cutout font, things that he cut out and you would paste up and all that things. But those grids, should have left some space in between them or made them smaller. It's like, the counters are half-inch counters, but make the image where you're going to lay them a little smaller so you can have a gap between them. So when you're setting the counters, that you've got, because trying to get in here and grab guys, it's flying all over the place. So that's, something normally that you don't talk about designer-wise, but because this guy was designer and publisher, if you go that route, if you're self-publishing, you're going to do printer player, whatever, you have to think of those things. If you're a designer and you're working with the publisher who's going to license your design, and maybe someone else is developing it, between the developer and the publisher, they're like, oh, this is not easy. Or the playtester's like, oh, we got to make some more room. And they could have. There's space here. They could have fit it. They could have made it a little bigger, spread it out that way or something. Just move some things around. So that's a usability pet peeve there. It's not that big of a deal. So again, this is not a huge criticism, but it would be easier. And you yourself could elect to make your own play aid or something. And, I wouldn't need all those counters out here. I could say, look, if I'm playing that first scenario, let me figure out which ones I need, get all the rest off the board, and let me spread them out a little bit and not worry about having them all there. Something like that. Now, what were some of the, okay, this is layout and ambiguities again. Okay, so on the reinforcement track, I would have liked, it mentions, the month and turn 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3 of each. I would like to have a rolling turn number where just, they could put it right in the top corner of the box or whatever, turn 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 50, whatever it is. I don't know how much it goes to all the way across. But that would be, in my mind, I don't know how many turns I have left. So like, well, how many is there and counting and whatever. That's just a tiny, tiny usability thing. But yeah, I'd like to see that. Now, these reinforcements, there was, again, that issue. Some of them say HB, probably the majority, more than half say HB coming on at your home base, but there's ones that don't say that. Where do they come on? Now, I don't know. I'm going to zoom in here so you can maybe see this a little better. Tilt down. By the way, whoa. Why is he so out of focus? I don't like the focus out there. That's Friedrich Nietzsche. Anyway, in case you were wondering, it really, at that distance, doesn't want to focus very well. Okay, see these black bars here? Now, I finally figured this out, and it's not certain. It doesn't say, but this unit doesn't come on here. Well, that's actually a withdrawal. He doesn't come on here. He doesn't come. All these units all come here on February 1st. This means draw a line down. These guys are like a long tail. You could have made them all vertical here. They're coming on here. And so it's like, well, these guys are coming on here. These guys are being removed here. If it's not next to the turn track coming straight down, like these guys here, this guy, and this guy are all coming on this turn, not him here and him here. So if there's more than two coming on, if there's just two, he shows them stacked like this, but otherwise he spreads them out with a long tail, and here he's making sure, well, that's this, and that's this, and that's this, and that's this. That was confusing at first. I was not sure. And I'm not 100% sure. Well, this turn here, these two would come on, he would leave. These four here, you can't quite see that. These four here are all coming on here. Not here, not here, there. So that's how you have to interpret that. And he could have made a little better room. Like this one could have gone down here. They could have had four. They could have come this way and kept it farther away. Because the close, like this here, this is touching. Well, these two are coming on and he's leaving here. That could have been neater and cleaner. Or maybe you put the four guys here and three guys here and you draw an arrow to this. Maybe you have little circles or arrows like, this group of, or that's a Germans will give you a group of, arrow. These are coming out. These are relatively easy for Germans except for those four there. That's all that turned. But got to note that. So that was a little pet peeve, little ambiguity. But nicer to explain that a little better design there. But again, for first time design and publishing your own, it works, but there's some confusions. So definitely this could have had another pass to explain some of those ambiguities, the consistency of language. So like again here, these rules here, you know, all those rules should be in the rule book. And the thing about retreating is not fully explained in the rule book. There's a difference between, okay, that after combat, getting to move if you've wiped out the enemy stack. Here it talks in terms of hexes. The other one talks in terms of movement points. You need to clarify that. I don't remember all the, probably I should have done a little should have gone back and watched all the videos, which some of them actually turned out to be a little long, but some of the inconsistency questions and the ambiguity. I think I've covered most of them. Now, I haven't played with the air power because air power didn't come on yet at this point. The air power is a symbol on the turn track like this. It's the standard like figure 8 or infinity symbol on its side, like an 8. It's like represents propellers, right? And that means that you have aviation assets on your turn. So I don't think, yeah, they're none until June here of 41. Which I you know, obviously there was some small air assets earlier, but not enough to have the combat effect. You know, so there's some, like I mentioned in the rule about isolation, like, oh, there could have been some resupply by air or recon, but not enough to do an air style attack and potentially have a chance to strafe someone. So that'd be interesting to play, you know, that second scenario with the Germans showing up and actually both sides potentially having air, and the way the air attacks sounded that you could only attack someone who had moved in their last turn. Either they're out there on the road in the desert, on one of the desert tracks, something, and you're like strafing them. Whereas if they're just sitting around at home, you know, you don't have big bombing assets or anything like that, big bombing raids. And so, yeah, you can't sit there and assume to be super strafing the fixed positions, because either you're not going to be able to really do enough to them, and they'd have enough anti-air assets that it's like not worth the risk or something. So it's a simplification, an abstraction, but it sounds interesting, right? That they can only make this attempt. There's a chance though that you can lose your air asset for number, not lose it, but this is number turn L, meaning if you've attacked by the air attack, you might not be able to use your asset for the next turn or two. And then there's mines and forts and stuff that were the advanced rules that didn't play with. Which I don't know how much, is there much mining or fortification? It's early on. I know later there was lots of that, but I don't think at first stage, his first scenario, there would have actually been any, or if there was, you know, maybe, you know, one fort or a couple of mines or something. I don't know. So let me see if I can take a last look at issues. Definitely, you got to read carefully. No, there's not a separate section about zones of control. It's buried in different places in the combat and supply area. Some mentions over here. You know, you got to read that supply rules carefully, how the supply works. And I liked it. It came out okay. You can attack without supplies, but if you don't spend the supplies, you have a penalty of +1 on the die roll. And again, I wish it was a minus, and the whole combat results table was turned around. I'd rather have penalties be a negative number and positive number be a bonus, but it is what it is. And the defender can burn supplies to make the attacker have an additional penalty. So potentially you could have 0 penalty, the attacker is spending supply, the defender didn't. The attacker could spend his supply and the defender does, in which case the attacker will have a 1 point penalty. And if the attacker didn't spend his supplies and the defender does, 2 point penalty. I two added to the die roll. Higher numbers are worse. That actually worked out quite well. I liked that. So between the movement, the supply interaction, the steps, that all worked quite well. I kind of liked it. It wasn't too fiddly. It gave me a lot of interesting decisions. I think I would like to see a few more results on here that don't do any damage and or just have retreats. There's not a single result on here that's R only, where the enemy had to retreat, but they're not taking any damage. And I think there should be some of those. But that's just me. I wouldn't I wouldn't try to figure out, like, well, if I wanted to do that, which thing, I'm not going to monkey with that. But, if I was making this for myself, yeah, I think I'd want to just have, actually, I'm lying here. Way down here, at 1 to 2, there are some results against the attacker, where the attacker has to retreat but doesn't take any loss. So let me correct myself. In the 1 to 1 range and up, and in any case, there are no results where the defender has to retreat but doesn't take loss. There are ones where there are losses and no retreating. I don't think there's any case where both the attacker and the defender retreat at the same time. There's some bloody parts of this stuff here, even in the 3 to 4 to 1s, where this is very painful here. It's almost like 4 to 1 is more bloody. Well, you have extra 1s here in a 3 to 1, but you got this extra 2 here. But you do more here. Unless you're so, and you can potentially get the big result. This is where you can get some nice breakthrough type thing where you can actually advance and move some more and get an extra attack in. If you can't get that net kill against a stack, you can't get a bonus attack. So anyway, I like it. If you like World War II games, specifically if you like, the North African campaign games, I think this is worth taking a look at. Maybe you think, I've got enough of the modern games, that's cool. But if you want to try something older, again, this is available at, relatively reasonable prices for a 50-year-old game. Of course, obviously, if 1 or 2 of you go out and get it, it'll be all sold out, and then it'll show up on Noble Knight Games for $300, $400, which is insane. But they, who knows? They often do that. But but boy, you can finish this a lot quicker than SPI's campaign for North Africa. And the footprint's much smaller here. I got this on a card. I've got a corrugated cardboard board because it does extend like 3 inches over the edge of the card table otherwise. Because this is like it's like a 23 by 35 inch map. Like instead of being your normal 22 by 34, the SPI kind of pioneered and became very, very standard even today. It's something like 23 by 35. And this card table is like 32 inches by 32, and so I ended up putting down this cardboard section on here. Yeah, read the rules carefully, read them again. If I don't usually like to mark games unless there's some glaring inaccuracies. If you're the type, you might want to like say, let me underwear underline everywhere where, that's what I was trying to say, shorten it to every underwear. Underline everywhere where they discuss zones of control instead of like, oh my God, I'm looking all over the place here. So I'm not sure, let's see, that I have much else to say. Yep. If you go for it, just be prepared to, you have to decide for yourself how to interpret some of these. Maybe I'll be able to at some point get some clarification. or not, but it is what it is. The counters, I'm going to show those to you again. The original counters that it come with, again. In retrospect, I should have just punched, quote unquote, punched them out. They're these guys. Let's see. Getting kind of the fuzziness there. Oh, that's better. All right, so wow, the color. This is yellow here. This is looking more light green. This here's dark green. This is light green. The green, this light green, at least I'm seeing through my camera, is almost what this shade looks like in real life. This, it's weird. Right now the color, you're sort of seeing more of this yellow, but no, it's the light to the camera. Really weird. Anyway, as I mentioned before, these are perforated. So I don't know how he had these made. It's like a thick paper. It's not really cardstock, but it's perforated, but it's not perfect here. But if you bend this back and forth enough, it will indeed. But because they were perforations, when I photocopied this to make my own, to actually mount them, you couldn't see most of these lines. So it was really hard cutting them out. So my counters look kind of crappy. I didn't use enough glue stick towards the edges. I didn't use enough glue stick. So some of those counters are already peeling. So, if you're more skilled at making counters, again, it's a 50-year-old game. You might want to preserve this, or just note if you punch these out, they're pretty darn thin, and I have no idea if tweezers would work with these, or if you're going to have to finger fool around with them to try stacking them and unstacking them. But they look pretty nice. I mean, for 50-year-old counters, independently produced. So, all right, folks. Meandering Mike, Man Cave of Madness. This has been a 42-minute after-action review. We discussed the actual battle action, the Allies winning a strategic victory, barely. There were some really tough moments. Obviously, I know more about the game now. I'd play a little bit different, but like I said, I'm not going to play that first scenario right away. I would probably go on and play the other two scenarios and then try the campaign game and stuff. Yeah. I definitely got my money's worth out of the game, just even playing that once. That was a enjoyable back and forth there. Some interesting surprises as I figured out the nature of some of this stuff. And the fact that it came down to a siege on Trobrook, dashes across here. It would have been nice if that one brigade had survived a little bit and the guys were trying to catch it. They could have thrown the armor to chase him, and the British armor would have eventually caught him because it's faster than the Italian one. But if they couldn't really afford to send that whole division there, and it would have been hard to reduce this. So, maybe they might not have been able to make it through. But they did capture this a couple turns to spare, which is barely. So, again, yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed myself. So, Meandering Mike, Man Cave of Madness. If you have any, opinions, have any other questions you want to know about that, or if any of you have actually played this before, what did you do about those rules ambiguities? How did you house rule them, or something like that, or whatnot? So, all you good folks out there, take care. Ciao. And coming up as soon as possible, I'm going to start my Letov Vorbeck World War I, East Africa, 1914 to 1918. So we'll still be in Africa. It's not in North Africa. We'll be in East Africa. That will be coming up hopefully within the next few days, because I got two more games to finish before the end of the year for my 10 games for the year for the War Rooms contesting, little challenge that they had. So take care, everybody. Have happy holidays. Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Saturnalia. Ciao.